morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to the FP&A Trends webinar. My name is Olga Rudakova. I'm a FP&A professional, data storytelling trainer, and FP&A Trends ambassador. I will be happy to facilitate this event for you tonight. Topic for tonight's event is top 5 FP&A challenges and how to address them. This topic has attracted over 400 attendees from 54 different countries. Quite amazing number. And let me start today by introducing the agenda of the evening. What we are going to speak about? We are going to speak about being true finance business partner, about using external benchmarks and business drivers in the planning process. We'll be speaking about need for higher agility and flexibility, need for systems and processes integration, and implementing extended planning and analysis and scenario planning. Quite a packed agenda for the evening. After that, we'll have conclusions and recommendations, and certainly a Q&A session. And now, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our panel for the evening. So, my dear panelists, please join me here on the webcam. And I will start introductions with you, Luis. Luis Parra is Financial Executive CFO, most recently with Scotiabank. Luis is a finance executive with extensive CFO experience and multiple speaker at FP&A Trends events. Luis, we are happy to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Olga, for inviting me.
Great, and we are happy to have you with us. Our second speaker for tonight will be Fernando Schreiner, FP&A Director at Gensler. Fernando is experienced director of FP&A with 33 years of experience, and again, multiple speaker at FP&A Trends event. Fernando, thank you for joining.
Thanks all for having me.
Great, and the last speaker for the event will be Pras Chatterjee, Senior Director at SAP. Pras has strong experience in leading projects and teams, and he's again multiple speaker at our FP&A Trends event. Pras, we are glad to have you with us tonight.
Great to be here as well, Olga.
Good, and let's move on to introducing FP&A Trends Group as such. You're probably familiar with our online resources, webinars, and workshops. We are as well an international FP&A board presented in 27 cities and 16 different countries. More than that, we are FP&A strategic advisory and research. We share best practice workshops and FP&A consultancy. So certainly you will have something in common with us. What we can expect tonight? First of all, let's go through some household items. We are expecting 1 hour webinar. We'll have 2 interactive polling questions on the webinar subject. We'll have Q&A sessions, so you can start asking questions through Q&A box right away. Presentation for the evening is already available at the handouts section of this event, and you will receive it together with the recording of the webinar sometime after the meeting. Please be sure to take part in the brief survey after the session. Your feedback is valuable for us. Now it's time for me to thank our sponsor for the event. Thank you, SAP, for making these events possible. It's one of the world's leading providers of modern FP&A solutions. Before we go into our topic, let me start with some introductory reflection. Let's all stop for a while and think about the biggest FP&A challenge that lies in front of you. What is the core challenge for you as a FP&A professional? Is it something that COVID pandemic has brought to you as a challenge, or it's something that has just revealed and it was already there for quite some time. Does your biggest challenge lie in the area of people, your team, or it's more related to processes or to systems or to the way we cooperate with the rest of the business? Maybe it's about integration or digitalization. When we were defining these 5 top challenges for tonight's event, we have realized how this definition is subjective. We can try and name one big holistic challenge, or we can, on the contrary, split our 5 challenges into smaller, more specific ones. And if number of challenges is subjective, remedies, the ways how to react on them, is certainly objective. And you will see that tips and pieces of advice from our panelists are covering more than one challenge. Actually, you will see how connected all these challenges are. Without further ado, let me move on to our first speaker, who will cover the first 2 challenges for tonight. Luis Parra will be speaking about being true finance business partner and about using external benchmarks and business drivers in the planning process. Luis, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Olga. Thanks everyone for joining this webinar. And let me start with one of the key factors for a successful FP&A function within any organization. And this is the partnership between finance and the business through the FP&A function. So organizations need to acknowledge and insert in their culture and DNA that all products, all segments, all business lines, together with finance, should know their P&L and understand their business drivers. Without this starting point, partnership cannot be possible. So please make sure that we in finance and FP&A help insert that culture in the DNA of the corporation. Now, one thing that helps make this possible is to start asking the CFO and the CEO of the organization to sponsor this culture, to push for this culture, to make sure everyone's accountable and has a deep knowledge of their business drivers in the organization, especially in finance and in the business areas. So next step is what finance really needs to do. So let's start with the pyramid that you see in the graph in the slide, and let's start at the bottom of the pyramid. So the first thing that finance needs to establish is a governance model, which means what, how, and when the business drivers will be measured and discussed. An example, establish a monthly performance meeting with its corresponding deck that includes not only direct financial metrics, but also other commercial business metrics that are related to the financial metrics that help understand and explain financial results. This could be sales productivity across units, stores, or branches, digital transformation, and its corresponding impact in cost reduction in the organization. This could be results of recent campaigns, new sales risk policies, impact of increasing or decreasing interest rates in our prices, in our margins, etc. So try to make something that is recurrent and disciplined in terms of measuring and seeing and analyzing the results of the organization. Then the next step in the pyramid is really discuss and find opportunities. So we need to dig deep into the details and find opportunities. Finance and FP&A, we need to be focused on the details. I remember doing an analysis in the retail banking industry where we discovered that a specific geography that represented 25% of the clients explained 80% of the profits. 50% of the clients explain a remainder 40%, and the remaining 25 accounted for negative results of 20%. So the direct action triggered by FP&A was to focus our efforts on profitable clients, deepen relationship with unprofitable clients that could be turned into profitable, or let the unprofitable clients that are outside of our strategy box go to competitors. So that's one thing that resulted from very detailed analysis. Then the next step is, once opportunities are identified, the role of FP&A doesn't stop there. We really need to make sure that our recommendations, when we find opportunities, are feasible. And then we tell the business what to do, if they can do, coordinate with other areas like technology, compliance, legal. And so this creates also a partnership with other support areas of the organization and not just the business. And then the role of FP&A is even going further. So we need to make sure that our recommendations are implemented. So, and the only thing to make sure this is implemented is that we provide a green check when actions translate into the bottom line. So FP&A is not just an area that analyzes and provides a recommendation. And this is where I like to add another A to FP&A, which is the A of action. And this is our passion. Our passion should be try to analyze, find an opportunity, implement a recommendation, and put FP&A much closer to the bottom line. And same as we heard before, because we cannot do this without other parts of the organization. For example, have you heard risk is everyone? Yes, we all heard that. Cybersecurity is everyone? Yes, we heard that. In the same way, I would like to say FP&A is everyone. We need to make sure we partnership with the business and the support areas, not only to provide recommendations, but to implement them. Now, moving to the next factor for success is using external benchmarks and business drivers in the planning process. So looking outside the organization is more important than you think. We cannot, for example, just putting an example, we cannot know why our house is flooded if we don't know it's raining. So we need to look outside. Or we cannot know why our neighbors don't have a flooding problem if we don't know how they avoid it. So this is just something that is applicable to the corporate world. So in the same way, internal benchmark is important to create a competitive environment, external benchmark is very, very important to push performance inside the organization. The problem is how and where can we get that information? So we are in an era of information. There's no justification for not doing benchmarking today in an organization. This is a must for an FP&A function, and we should have an internal function of benchmarking inside FP&A, inside finance. Industries like banking and insurance are full of information from regulators and associations. Like most companies publish interim financial statements, results, press releases, where we can get financial information and qualitative information as well. It is important for all finance professionals, if we don't know where to get that information, to connect with our peers in other companies of your corresponding industry. Get a sense of what they're doing, their challenges, where they're getting their information. We can get valuable information, of course, respecting the corporation's confidentiality. Use social media like LinkedIn that we're using today to connect with other professionals and know the best way to navigate through the information available out there. So, but including benchmark is not just something to provide to our business partners and let them see if they do something. We should include benchmarking, external benchmarking information in your business review meetings and ask questions. For example, in the banking industry, it is very typical. How can we see the movements in interest rates impacting our results? And why is it different in our case, in our company versus competitors, for example? And then suggest a corrective action if the company is deviated. That's a specific example. Are you spending too much or too little? What is the best in class efficiency ratio in your industry? Are you getting closer every year? And those are questions that we should be asking and information that we should be getting out there. Now, the next step for benchmarking to be effective is to work with your HR partners. So to include benchmarking external information versus competitors in the compensation of executives. And this is something that big companies do, where there's very reliable information about what other companies are achieving. We should always make sure that this is included in compensation, because let's say a business area meets revenue plan, but that's not necessarily good if we are behind the competition. So make FP&A an area that triggers a healthy competitive environment by looking for information not only in the organization, but outside. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Luis, for covering these two top challenges of FP&A today. If you have any questions to Luis, it is right time to ask them through Q&A box. And meanwhile, let me ask you a question. It's time to have our first polling interaction. And I'm very curious to look inside your organizations and see what is the primary role of your FP&A team in supporting the business. Is it mostly budgeting, forecasting, and reporting? Or you see your main role in cost controlling and alerts and reminders? You see a key role is ad hoc analysis and data crunching. And another option is challenging assumptions and supporting decision making. What is a key role of your team in supporting the business? I'm actually really curious to know, and most of you have already voted by now. So it's time for us to close this poll and share the results. What we see here, absolute majority of our participants, 79%, stated that key role of the FP&A team is in budgeting, forecasting, and reporting. 12% actually support business by challenging assumptions and supporting decisions. Another 7% say that ad hoc analysis and data crunching is a key role, and only 1% mentioned cost controlling and reminders. Luis, let me ask you to briefly comment on these polling results. Is it something that you have expected?
In reality, it doesn't surprise me. And now looking at the first three functions, budgeting, cost controlling, ad hoc analysis, those are things that definitely an FP&A area should do. And that is really the day-to-day, okay? And this is producing reports, budgeting, forecasting. Now, the biggest value add of FP&A is the fourth, which is challenging assumption and supporting decisions. And this is where we start not only providing data and reports, but providing some value-added analysis, challenging information that we have the privilege of knowing more than the business, because we have more information than what they do. They know other stuff. They know how to sell. We know how to analyze and how to look at things overall and support our decisions. And this is what is going to make us be a real business partner, challenging assumptions and supporting decisions and making sure we add value to the organization.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for this comment. And we have slightly covered through this polling question the first challenge that Luis has addressed in his presentation, being true finance business partner. Now it's time for us to move on and actually discuss a bit the second challenge, using external information, external benchmark, external drivers in our decisions. And let me ask all of our panelists to join me here for a short discussion. The question that I want to discuss is how can FP&A, how can we practically help our business to incorporate external data into decision making? And let me start with this question with you, Fernando. What do you think? How we can help?
Great question, Olga. I would say that the importance of making data-driven decisions, right? That's quite important. For example, Gensler is in the architecture and design industry, so we do pay close attention to the impact that the certain macroeconomic factors have to our industry, such as inflation, GDP, unemployment levels, supply chain issues, construction material costs, especially nowadays, etc. That could, for example, create delays to our projects. Projects to be put on hold, like happened during the pandemic, or even canceled. But I would also highlight the fact that business partnership goes both ways. Like, for example, our regional finance, regional operating officers, finance directors, marketing, and FP&A, we work closely with our practitioners to make sure our CRM solution and all the active opportunities we have are updated on a regular basis to help drive more accurate revenue forecasts and do course correction as needed on a timely manner. Otherwise, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Thank you. Thank you for this answer, Fernanda. And let me move it on to you, Pras. Maybe you can bring technology perspective. How can we help our business to incorporate external data into decision making?
Yeah, absolutely, Olga. So there's a lot for FP&A to do in this realm. I mean, the key, I think, is invest in technology. McKinsey recently wrote a paper about the fact that one of the things that an FP&A department can do to become more modern, amongst many things outlined, is invest in technology. And one of the investments they can make is maybe a modern, clean data warehouse, a data warehouse which is not your grandfather's or grandmother's data warehouse, but a modern data warehouse which is cloud-based that really pulls data from external sources. And it's data of all sorts and types. I mean, we're not just looking at measuring ourselves against financial data as FP&A or operational data, but there's data from social media, sentiment analysis that comes in, lets you measure how are your competitors faring in the world in terms of perception versus yourself, and use this to build a better picture and better model. And ultimately, by having a central data warehouse with analytics built in directly to it, you're able to democratize this data. You're able to share it with all of your colleagues and counterparts and really let the information flow freely in the organization that everybody's aware of. It's not a surprise, and you're able to make better decisions with it.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. Thank you for bringing this term of democratizing data, and certainly external data should be part of this as well. Back to you, Luis. I know that you have covered it partially in your presentation, mentioning publishing financial statements, mentioning many sources of external data. But if you want to look specifically in this, how can we practically incorporate this into our decision making? Are there any other pieces of advice you can give us?
Yeah, so the first thing is we need to acknowledge what is the external source of data that is applicable to our business and where it is, and have an agreement not only with the business but also with the president and CEO of the company, and then agree what is how clean the data is, how we can use it, and how we can incorporate it in the executive compensation, as I said before, because that's the most effective way of making sure that external data and performance versus competition is really live, and we live it day to day.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for all of your answers, for all of your pieces of advice. And let's move on to the next presentation of the evening. Fernando Schreiner will be speaking about another two top challenges of FP&A these days: need for higher agility and flexibility, and need for systems and processes integration. Fernando, the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Olga. I would say that the pandemic is probably the closest event to talk about in terms of lessons learned with respect to the importance of having this higher agility and flexibility, but also about finance being a trusted partner and influencer across the organization, like Luis just talked about. No company on earth was absolutely prepared to effectively respond to the COVID-19 outbreak in its earliest days. So with coronavirus advancing horribly quickly at the time, we had to act decisively, and we did very swiftly. We made sacrifices to keep the firm healthy. It was really about making those difficult choices early, from reductions in salaries to virtual meetings, also going virtual meeting investments in technology. It meant flexibility, agility, even I would say psychology. It also meant transparent communication in CRM planning, and believe me, many of those, especially within FP&A, as well as leadership, the empathy and real understanding of the situation. We had to tighten our belts, a laser focus on collection since cash is king, and so a great client connection. So finally meant really staying faithful to people first. So the question was, what ultimately drives performance? It's really about maintaining the long view and not letting what was happening at the time really change our vision, our long-term vision and strategy. So the vision is actually the way we measure the future of our practice in design, and the long view, our sense of purpose, basically. So many sacrifices were made by so many of our colleagues at the time to make sure we could weather the COVID storm. We took, for example, salary reductions. We reduced the hours of many of our colleagues. We furloughed others when we knew there was not enough work. And even we made difficult decisions to lay off some of our friends and colleagues. And finally, we know we had many team members who were having to balance things like childcare, homeschooling, elderly parents, and other work from home challenges, not to mention actually the mental strain we're all under. Finance was deeply involved in scenario planning and analysis to help the leadership team make those well-educated decisions. That was very important at the time, and is still important up to these days. So that being said, in order to stay really ahead of the time, we did not sit around wringing our hands. We basically started acting even before COVID. So beginning the summer of 2019, we continued stress testing our long-term retirement obligations, for example, to ensure we would have the liquidity to pay them out, even in a severe downturn. The executive leadership team at Gensler, for example, we communicated often and transparently. We found new platforms, ways to communicate, even with one another. So we focus on our one firm culture, as we usually talk about, while bringing people together and gaining alignment across the firm about the need to act swiftly at the time. So we continue scenario planning, made decisions quickly, and allowed ourselves actually to even make mistakes. As I talked about, we didn't have this like a blueprint on how to do the pandemic. So we allowed ourselves to make mistakes along the way and learn from them. So that was very important. And we made difficult choices that affected all of us throughout it all. We kept our eyes, as I mentioned earlier, on the horizon, right, the long view. And we took steps to ensure that the firm remained financially healthy. So on my next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what was the impact of all those actions. Above all, we have kept our people safe. As I said, was #1 priority. So we've done our best to retain our best talent, and we made investments in technology that has put us out in front. At the same time, we are continuing to build our financial strength. So we took a large accounts receivable reserve that year for all the receivables that were over 150 days old, which retained earnings and gave us time to collect. So we put a renewed focus on the collection that I also mentioned earlier on. So we eliminated almost all discretionary expenses, and we appropriated, like basically took a reserve for earnings for future principal stock buyouts, so as not to negatively impact our next generation. In abundance of caution, we upsized our credit facility to ensure continued liquidity and availability of capital if needed. So now on the next slide, let's talk a little bit about shifting gears and talk about the importance and need for systems and process integration. So Gensler has been going through digital transformation for a while. We use a pretty robust human capital management platform for employee experience management, skills management, workforce optimization, and recruiting. Same applies to our client relationship management platform. We've been using it to sell like basically smarter and faster by increasing sales force productivity and revenue, keeping track of every client interaction, basically automating redundant tasks and admin work that goes with CRM, and creating more engaging marketing by sending targeted and personalized messaging and triggering messages based on client actions. So it's also empowering our practitioners to forecast. That's a very important step that happened by enforcing the usage of our CRM solution. Empowering our practitioners actually to forecast more accurately and making data-driven decisions. So once again, like we've come a long way to improve our budget and forecast process across the firm by implementing a robust business process management platform. Give you an example. 5 years ago, Gensler was doing P&L planning across 50 offices that roll up to 10 regions. We're doing revenue planning for 29 practice areas. That's how we look at our portfolio. And cash flow, all in Excel. So for lack of a better financial platform, we could only forecast twice a year. So now we have, 5 years later, a much better financial planning platform that was designed at scale, important perspective, enables visibility, agility, and the collaboration across the business to accelerate revenue growth, expand our margins, and better manage risk as well. So it's been used across the firm for P&L planning, absolutely across the firm. We use for workforce planning, we use for operating expenses, we use for capital expenditure, cash flow, and also different axes of the firm. We have also implemented a much better expense management platform over the last few years that has been fully deployed across all 50 offices in 16 countries where we operate. So those are all great tools that serves, I would say, a particular purpose. However, we realize that they would be even better and much more insightful if they were integrated. So for instance, Gensler is a global architecture design and planning firm with over 6,000 people. So it's a professional services firm. So our recruiting data and all the respective steps in the recruiting process sits in our HCM platform. So it's very important and insightful data for our short-term and long-term workforce planning process. So therefore, what we've done is we've started looking into much better integration between our HCM and BPM solutions, make sure they talk to each other, if you will. So that goes for revenue forecast as well. It's done in our BPM platform, like I talked about, but the entire sales pipeline sits in our CRM solution. So guess what? We needed to look into integrating or provide a much better integration between our BPM and CRM platforms. Another great example would be our procurement platform that help us track things like software licenses across the company. Another great opportunity should be integrated with our BPM platform. So again, it's like basically what this slide is showing is that all those solutions are pretty useful and insightful, but they're much better if you integrate them to provide better outcome for each one of those solutions and platforms. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for sharing this practical example, how you personally, how your company faced these two challenges, need for agility and flexibility, and need for systems and processes integration. If you have any questions to Fernando, it is about right time to ask them through our question box. And meanwhile, I will ask our audience a question as well. First, related to agility and flexibility. I really want to know, how long does it take to update your plans? In order to react to external events, we certainly need to have this ability to update our plans very quickly, very flexibly. So let's see how long does it take us. It has to wait until the next planning cycle to plan an answer. It takes less than a month. It takes less than a week, or it can be done instantly within hours. Let's see, where do we stand as a finance in updating our plans? It has to wait until the next planning cycle. It takes less than a month, less than a week, or can be instantly done. Let me close this poll, as most of you have already voted, and let me share these results with you. What do we see here? That most of us, 42%, have stated that it has to wait until the next planning cycle. Another 36% say that it can be done anytime, but in less than a month's time. 19% can do it in less than a week. And actually 3% have stated that it can be instantly done within hours. Fernando, what do you think? What do you think about these polling results?
It's a great outcome. I'm not that surprised. I actually like to see the 22% between less than a week and instantly within hours, because that would put those organizations more on the advanced level. If you think about the overall FP&A maturity model, certainly quite high, the 42 versus the 36%, especially if you try to forecast more often. Right, we talked about the benefit of process, addressing process issues if you have the right people, the right skill set, as well as the digital FP&A. All those are platforms, I would say, elements important to drive you into better overall FP&A or overall financial planning process. The technology is quite important, I think, to minimize the cycle of the update. I think digital FP&A plays quite an important role in that as well.
Great. Thank you for this answer. And let us move on to our second discussion for the evening. So please, all of you, join me here on the webcam, and we will speak about how we can achieve this flexibility. How can we actually make our plans and forecasts easy to update and act upon? And I certainly want to hear some of technology perspective here as well. We've just been speaking about systems and process integration just recently. So let's see what we can answer. And let me start with you, Pras. What do you think? How can we make our plans easy to update and act upon?
Yeah, I mean, based on the answers in the polling in the last question, I'm going to make an assumption and say that many of those organizations that take over a week and greater might be working in Microsoft Excel, which means that you can't act quickly and act fast as a group, as a cohesive business unit, rather as an individual. Because Excel, I mean, as much as finance individuals love Excel and its free-form abilities, it's not meant to cater global enterprise-wide planning. And if you're going to make plans where you want to make it easy to update and act upon, you need a cloud-based planning system with analytics available, moving away from Excel, where when you make changes and updates, it models immediately for you and gives you results. And alluding to what I went back before as well, the results are available not just to you in finance, but to your business constituents as well, so that everybody can see the results at the same time, the impact of actions, and act upon them immediately as well.
Indeed. Thank you for this perspective. And coming to you, Luis, what do you think? What can we do to make our plans easy to update and act upon?
To make our plans easy to update, it relates to what I talked before. We should know what is going on in the market in order to update those assumptions quickly. Second, we need to know our business drivers in order to know what is really changing in our financial results recently. And then the other, from a governance perspective and modeling perspective, is we should have at least two separate levels of complexity when it comes to updating planning. One, which is quick and simple, so that we can act quickly, and then the other is more complex and integral, where we can include all the business drivers for our annual business planning, for example.
Thank you for this deep answer. Thank you, Luis. And moving to you, Fernando, what can you add? How can we make it easy to update and act upon?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with Pras and Luis. I would recommend focus on three things: process, people, and digital FP&A. From a process standpoint, I would highlight the importance of design of scenario management, which is key element of FP&A. Certainly has proven to be critical during the pandemic or any recession. As a matter of fact, we've been there, like we've gone through that situation, and scenario management, scenario planning has proven to be absolutely priceless. But it needs to be quick and multidimensional. That's an important thing. To Pras' point, we were back in the day 5 years ago all in Excel, and it would be really, really hard to respond to the leadership team on a timely manner if we had not put in place a better platform, if we're still living on the old Excel days. Two, I would say make sure you have the right people, like the team members involved in the overall financial planning process across the firm. Forecast is definitely not just a financial exercise. And last but not least, focus on the digital FP&A. Make sure you have an agile platform, leverage predictive analytics, driver-based planning, or even artificial intelligence and machine learning where applicable in your organization. So those would be the three things that I would highlight: the process, people, and digital FP&A.
Indeed, and thank you for your answer, because it makes a nice bridge to our next technology-related presentation. Very soon, Pras will be speaking about implementing extended planning and analysis and scenario planning. So Pras, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Olga. And let me set up in a baseline right now and be very clear to all of you. Planning is an absolute business imperative. There's no doubts about that whatsoever. What we know based on our research, especially with you and FP&A Trends and other bodies externally, is that most organizations are striving to be much more intelligent and agile and ultimately sustainable as well. And this is now this new normal of a process of a world we live in where there's continuous change. Black swan events are effectively the new normal. It's not like pre-pandemic where we can anticipate the status quo effectively. There really is no more status quo. It's almost impossible to anticipate what may or what may not happen in terms of the world. And ultimately, the focus is on transforming as an organization to better serve the customers, employers, and society. And how we do this, one of the ways, is through better and more enhanced FP&A. And to get to that point, we need to be in a place where the people and plans ultimately through the organization are completely aligned. We know that often organizations start their directive and their direction from a strategic plan where the C-level executives come in and they debate the strategy and the merits of where the organization might go, and they come out with a plan that's meant to last 1, 3, 5 years in terms of guidance of investments and where the organization is going. But ultimately what ends up happening often is after that strategic plan is divulged and agreed upon, plans start occurring in silos. Often there's we know that everybody in the organization plans. Finance plans, marketing plans, sales plans, IT plans. Every member of the organization does some shape or form of a budget. Maybe not as detailed as us in finance, but everyone does it. But what ends up happening is that from that strategic plan, when it gets down to operational financial plans, they aren't integrated. In fact, they're completely disconnected, with plans occurring in disparate systems, across different geographies, in different spreadsheets, and there's no connection. And what happens without this connection is your ability to adjust as FP&A to different scenarios and black swan events is immediately limited. So how do we respond to this? Well, let's set up another baseline. FP&A is an absolute strategic partner to the business. Going back to the same McKinsey studies I talked about before, they also made it very clear that one of the most strategic parts of a successful business now is a strong and robust and flexible FP&A department, because FP&A has a seat at the table. There's no doubt about that. You and FP&A have been called upon during the last 2 years, not just to present budgets and forecasts, but to give outcomes, provide guidance, give the impact of different decisions. As Fernando mentioned before, the impact of furloughs, impact of hiring, impact of disruption in supply chains or whatnot. There absolutely are disruptions that are occurring in the business, and it's up to you and FP&A to really support the business with strategic decision making based on the tools and data available to you to lead planning across enterprise. So when Louis said before that finance is a true business partner, I want to, not only do I fully agree with that, I'd like to take a step further, saying not only are they a true business partner, they are a leader in the organization when it comes to enterprise-wide planning, and just a leader in the enterprise. So the step they take to get there is, moving on, adopting an xP&A process. To adopt an xP&A process, one of the first things that they need to do is really have strategic alignments with all departments in terms of a modern cloud-based planning solution that, number one, maintains the integrity of every department's plan. So the way marketing does their plans is different than the way sales does it, but there's alignment in terms of maybe a common planning tool or common set of tools. Common set of tools that are fully integrated with your core applications, your ERP, your CRM, your BPM tools, your HCM, as Fernando had mentioned before as well. Now, what we have with this strategic alignment of all departments is that everybody not only is working across a common set of assumptions, but they're sharing data as well. So when sales sets their targets, marketing has campaigns that can help support sales. When supply chain and sales and S&OP are setting up their S&OP process and coming out to their reconciliation, Ultimately, HR might know based on what operations is agreed to in terms of demand, what new headcount has to be onboarded, and IT can look at those plans and forecast how much assets or capital they need to invest in. And ultimately, all of this data can flow into you in FP&A, so you can make better decisions in the moment and respond to market disruptions as well. And again, the key thing here is that all of this is integrated with your core set of business applications, your ERP, your CRM, your HCM tools, your supply chain tools, all in a common planning analysis template and platform. The next part of this is really FP&A being a strategic partner to the business through scenario planning. Scenario planning is absolutely key. Fernando highlighted that, and I can't stress enough the importance of this, because this is what makes you and FP&A a complete game changer when it comes to your competitors, as well as the way you provide value to your business. I'll provide an example. When I started my career in FP&A over 20 years ago, I was likely one of the worst FP&A analysts of all time, because when my business came to me and asked me for guidance or an outcome or some sort of solution, my reaction was, I'll get back to you. The reason I said I'll get back to you is because I had no data at my fingertips. I didn't have the ability to model. Once we did a budget or forecast in our legacy planning solutions, powered by Excel as well, I mean, we were almost afraid to break it again. So once the budget was set, a business update was set, let's not rock the boat. Let's not change any assumptions, because who knows how long it'll take to calculate it. But modern cloud-based planning tools don't really limit you in terms of data. They don't limit you in terms of where data comes from as well. And they don't limit you in terms of who you can share this data with. Really, modern cloud-based planning tools not only connect with your enterprise applications, but they come with scenario planning. So the first part of scenario planning they come with is predictive planning built directly into the solution. So as FP&A, you can effectively look at a budget, a forecast update, a budget update, some sort of scenario plan or whatnot, and run a machine learning or AI algorithm directly on it, on an assumption to see where you might stand, what the accuracy rates might be, or what might happen based on the result of your assumptions, based on things that might not be available to the human eye. And through this, you can also create anomaly detection or whatnot, and use ML and AI that is built into modern cloud-based planning tools, not just as something scary that it might have been in the past, as some sort of data scientist-driven process, but really as a friend and a complement and as a fellow planner to help you simulate future outcomes. And what you can do with this ultimately is help plan with your business, not away from your business, but with your business. So as your business comes to you with questions, sit with them, model with them, come up with different outcomes. Forget about, there's no restrictions when it comes to data. There's no restrictions when it comes to modeling. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're able to plan with your business as a true business partner and provide immediate and readily available, credible answers to drive better decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Pras, for such an uplifting ending. Indeed, driving better decisions could be one of the main goals of FP&A today. After this presentation, let's all put our cameras on and let's move to the one of closing part of this event, key takeaways. So let's literally in 30 seconds say key idea for each of you of the whole event. And let me start with you, Luis. What is a key takeaway for you?
The key takeaway for everyone here is, please be a business partner by knowing the business drivers of your company and the competition as well, and provide value and value-added analysis. Remember, there's only 2 areas in the organization that can ask all the questions you want. One is audit, the other is finance through FP&A. So FP&A is a great area to learn, and I think is the best area to work in an organization.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Fernando, what's a key takeaway from the whole session for you?
I would probably highlight 4 key takeaways from what we talked about. I think number 1, focus on rapid strategic model. Like I mentioned earlier, scenario management must be quick and multidimensional. 2, continuous forecasting. So if you're able to see where you're going, do course correction in a timely manner. Three, leading technologies and platforms. If you're going through digital transformation within FP&A, I would highly recommend you make sure you design your solution at scale. And last but not least, new and amplified skills for the FP&A organization. For instance, make sure you have, if applicable, again, depends on the size of the organization and where you are in your maturity model, data scientist, an FP&A architect, depending on your platform, FP&A analysts, of course, great storyteller. You need to make sure you have storytellers within FP&A, and also influencer, the business, to bring the true business partnership that Luis was talking about as well, and Pras.
Thank you, Fernando. And Pras, what is a key takeaway for you from the whole session?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the key takeaway is that technology is no longer a hindrance. Rather, it's a friend, and it's a process that can really help expand upon everything that Luis and Fernando talked about. Modern cloud-based solutions, not available not just from my organization, but from all of my competitors, really help modern FP&A go to the next level, be a true business partner. And it's available in the cloud, and it's easy to deploy. It's much cheaper than it was. And I think that organizations that do adopt these technologies really highlight, as Fernando showed, that they can do better scenario planning, be better business partners, and ultimately give their organizations better guidance.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you all for your key takeaways from the session. And we will move on to our Q&A, questions and answers. And thank you to all members of our audience who submitted their questions tonight. Let us answer at least some of them. And I will start with you, Fernando. The first question is related to transformation your business has come through. So the question is, you have come through quite an impressive business transformation recently. So which new FP&A skills you needed during this time? Which skills you needed to acquire?
I wouldn't say we had to acquire necessarily during the pandemic. We had to make some change to the platform, right? As I said in the beginning of my presentation, we didn't have this like crystal ball or a blueprint on what's going to happen, how long the pandemic was going to last, how long we had to work from home. And we didn't have even the platform set up properly for us to even not only to decide how we're going to face the pandemic, like I explained, like for example, we had over 6,000 people at the time, and if we had to do a workforce reduction, if we had to put people on furlough, if we had to reduce the hours across 16 countries, 50 offices, 10 regions, 29 practice areas, we had to find the right balance. That's where digital FP&A, I talked about the three things, right? The importance during the pandemic or lessons learned, having the right process, having the right people, and make sure the digital FP&A was in good terms. We had to look at all of that to help the leadership team make a well data-driven decisions. Basically, we had to look and leverage our platform, and like I said, be quick and multidimensional on how we did scenario management to try and make sure that we're going to make the decisions, well-educated decisions, and on a timely manner. That was absolutely priceless at the time.
Thank you for this answer. And next question from the audience is addressed to you, Pras. Well, it's related to using external data in our systems, in our solutions. What sources of external data are readily available to tap?
Yeah, I mean, many brokers, many data-related organizations have data available that can be seamlessly connected to your data warehouses or whatnot. So, I mean, it depends really on where you are. I mean, you can get it from SEC filings, Edgar Online or whatnot, connect those sort of financials directly in, depending on the organization you work with, the operational data that is relevant to helping drive your performance, depending, again, what your industry is. Industry-leading organizations provide that data as well. So all of that information is available for you to use within your organization. But I also stress that it's not just about brokering that kind of data, but it's also looking at social media and sentiment analysis, because many organizations are highly sensitive in their business in terms of what external perception is. Look at that type of data as well and model and bring that data together, which is very easily done now through modern planning, analysis, and data warehouse tools to, again, share with your business partners and business constituents what the outcomes might be based on certain actions you might take.
Thank you, Pras. And the last question is addressed to you, Luis. It's appeared right after you spoke about being true finance business partner. As you know, CROs, which is Chief Revenue Officer, and COOs, which is Chief Operations Officer, are normally very strong individuals and not very happy about being held accountable. How does one navigate through this political climate?
So, and that's actually a very good question. And most chief revenue officers, business line heads, operating officers, they of course think they know much more than finance does in terms of their own business, and they think we have nothing to add. So when a FP&A function is limited to measuring and providing reports and saying you have a green check or a red X for achieving or not achieving the results, this is when nobody likes us, really. And this is just the way to break a partnership. So the way to do it is to start working together and help them find opportunities in terms of revenue. For example, I led a revenue assurance program in the past by which we analyzed together how competitors were charging specific fees or rates, and then proposing a new model and proving that that was going to provide value of higher than $5 million in this case. And then when we provided that analysis and worked together and helping achieve the results, this is when they liked us, because we are working together towards a common goal. And this is what we should achieve and try to convince them to work with us.
Really nice words to end this session about really truly working together towards common goal. And thank you all for answering these questions from the audience. We'll try to answer remaining ones in writing after the event. My dear panelists, stay with me till the very end of these slides, because there are only few left before we say goodbye to our audience. Let me invite all of you to our upcoming FP&A Trends webinar about maximizing FP&A value through automation. So join us in June, very soon, in 1 month's time. That's another thank you from me to our sponsor, SAP, one of the world's leading providers of modern FP&A solutions. Thank you for making these events possible. And let me share with you all the ways you can connect to us, to FP&A Trends global community. So feel free to choose the option which suits you best. After we finish this webinar, the short survey will appear on your screen. It literally takes few seconds to take part in it, so please do so. Our feedback is very important for us. And at this stage, I want to thank you all our panelists, for being here with us, sharing your knowledge with us, answering our questions. Big thank you to our audience for active participation. Have a good day, have a good rest of the week, and see you soon. Goodbye.